I bet you've noticed it too, right?
Yeah.
Like, go into the store and everything just seems pricier
Oh,
than
yeah.
it used to be. Rent keeps going up. It seems like inflation is just everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not going away anytime soon. So we thought we would take a deep dive into this
Yeah.
topic of inflation. And specifically, we're going to explore this argument that the wealthy
Okay.
have more of a hand in it than we usually hear about.
Interesting.
So for this deep dive, we looked at analyses from the IMF, studies on this thing called quantitative easing.
Oh, yeah?
You heard of that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
We looked at a bunch of research on how corporations set their prices and all these articles about trends in the housing market.
Interesting.
And we even dug into some economic perspectives on,
Right.
global supply chains and how all that stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
We're on a mission to figure out if and how much the wealthy
Okay.
could be contributing to rising prices, in a way that maybe impacts us more than other things.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I think when we think about inflation,
Yeah,
we often think about, just the classic supply and demand.
right.
But what if there's more to it than that? Like, what if the stuff that wealthy people are doing is actually driving up costs
Yeah, exactly.
for everyone else?
Let's jump into that. Let's talk about how wealth actually gets, put to work in the economy.
Okay.
We know that really wealthy people and these huge corporations,
Right.
they invest a ton of money into assets
Yeah.
like real estate, stocks, and commodities.
Yeah.
So how could those kinds of investments lead to higher prices
Yeah.
for the things that we buy every day?
Well, I think the interesting thing there is how those investments end up affecting,
Right.
the supply and demand. Like take housing, for example.
Yeah.
We saw in some of these housing market articles that when wealthy investors come in and they're buying up a lot of properties, it actually shrinks the supply of homes
Oh, interesting.
that are available for regular people who are just trying to, rent.
Buy a place to live.
Yeah.
And so when you have less supply and you still have the same amount of demand or even more, prices just go up. And that impacts affordability for everyone.
Right, right. Supply, same demand, prices go up. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So then there's this other argument that we saw,
Okay.
and it came up in some of this research about how corporations set their prices. Basically, the idea is that these huge companies that are often, backed by a ton of wealth,
Yeah.
they might use their power in the market to raise prices
Yeah.
just to make more profit. And this is especially true
Okay.
when everyone's kind of expecting inflation to happen anyway. In fact, we even saw some data showing that some companies had record profits during these times when inflation was really high.
Well, that is interesting. I mean, it makes you wonder, though,
Yeah.
what's driving those profits? Is it really just because their costs have gone up, or are they just, taking advantage of the situation?
And kind of, squeezing their margins a little bit. I think the research on corporate pricing offers some really interesting insights there.
It does. All right, so let's switch gears a bit and talk about monetary policy.
Okay.
Things like this quantitative easing that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So we saw some arguments out there that these policies, even though they're supposed to help the economy, might actually be disproportionately helping the wealthy.
Oh, but
Because they inflate the value of things like stocks and real estate, which are assets that, wealthy people tend to own more of.
Right.
But at the same time, wages for most people aren't going up at the same rate.
Yeah.
So just to remind everybody, quantitative easing basically means that the central bank
Right.
is pumping money into the economy by buying up assets.
Exactly. And the IMF analyses and the studies on quantitative easing that we looked at really point to that effect you were talking about, where asset values increase maybe faster than wages do.
Yeah. And that can actually worsen the wealth gap.
Totally. Okay, so we've been talking about a lot of stuff
We have.
that could be contributing to inflation.
Yeah.
But we have to remember,
Yeah.
inflation isn't just caused by one thing. Our sources also talked a lot about how disruptions to global supply chains and changes in energy prices play a huge role.
All for sure.
And those things aren't necessarily the fault of wealthy people.
Right. That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Like, we can't just point the finger at the wealthy for every price increase.
Totally.
Yeah. The economic analyses of supply chains that we looked at show pretty clearly how stuff happening outside of any one country can lead to inflation. And then you've got energy markets, too.
Yeah.
They're just a whole other beast.
Right. They have their own thing going on.
Exactly.
Now, some people argue that investments by the wealthy actually do some good too.
Okay.
They can help the economy grow, create new jobs, and maybe make everyone more productive.
And that could lead to more stable prices in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, it's complicated, right? It's like all these different forces pushing and pulling.
Yeah.
So to really get inflation, I think you have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah, our sources really show that.
For sure.
So let's do a quick recap.
Okay.
We talked about these arguments that the investments the wealthy make.
Right.
And the way corporations set their prices could be playing a part in inflation.
Uh-huh.
But we also know that monetary policies and just broader economic trends are huge factors too.
Absolutely. I mean, this deep dive really shows how complex inflation is. And it's no wonder there's so much debate about what really causes it.
It's true. So now we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Think about everything we've discussed. The potential impact of really wealthy people and corporations.
Yeah.
The influence of what's happening in the global economy.
Right.
And what central banks are doing. When you look at the inflation that you're experiencing every single day, what one thing do you think is having the biggest impact? And why do you think that? We want you to really consider how all these pieces connect. And maybe even think about how it's affecting your own finances.
Yeah, great question.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments.